Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when England was less of a united kingdom and more of a bloody, muddy battlefield, all leading to the disturbing rise of the Tudor Dynasty. Imagine yourself not just reading about knights and castles, but actually being there, feeling the biting English wind, smelling the damp earth after a rain, and hearing the distant clatter of steel on steel. This isn't some romanticized fairy tale, this is raw, brutal history, filled with betrayals, desperate gambits, and the constant threat of a swift, ignoble end. Honestly, if you lived back then, you'd probably be a peasant caught in the crossfire. And let's just say your odds of survival wouldn't be great. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself dropped into the heart of 15th century England, a land utterly exhausted, ravaged by decades of relentless civil war. This isn't just a political squabble, this is a sprawling, brutal conflict known as the Wars of the Roses. You see the very landscape scarred by battles, villages burned, and fields left fallow. A stark testament to the devastating toll of continuous internecine strife. The war isn't fought by professional armies as we might imagine them today, but by retinues of feudal lords, often changing loyalties, their personal ambitions fueling the endless cycle of violence. You feel the constant fear that permeates everyday life, the uncertainty of who will rule tomorrow, or even if you'll survive the next skirmish. The conflict, as you quickly learn, is a dynastic struggle for the English throne between two powerful branches of the Plantagenet royal family, the House of Lancaster, whose emblem is a red rose, and the House of York. Represented by a white rose, you observe the deep-seated animosity, the bitter rivalries that stretch back generations, fueled by usurpation, murder, and broken promises. This isn't just a squabble for power, it's a blood feud, where vengeance is a dish best served on the battlefield. Often with a swift execution to follow, the very air seems to crackle with tension. Even in moments of apparent peace, you witness the seemingly endless parade of kings, many of whom meet violent or mysterious ends. Think about it. Edward the Faty, a strong Yorkist king, dies unexpectedly young. His young sons, the princes in the Tower, vanish without a trace under the supposed care of their uncle. Richard III. You feel the chill of suspicion, the lingering questions that hang over these disappearances. No one truly knows what happened to them, and that uncertainty becomes a brutal secret, a dark stain on Richard's reputation. This period is a dizzying carousel of rulers, each seizing the crown through force, only to have it ripped from their grasp by another ambitious contender. It's like watching a real life, much more violent game of musical chairs where the music stops for the current monarch. And they're promptly beheaded. Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, looms large in this chaotic landscape. You see him, a formidable warrior, a man of decisive action, but one burdened by the chilling rumors surrounding his ascension. Was he a calculating murderer who eliminated his nephews to secure the throne? Or was he a victim of later Tudor propaganda? Unfairly maligned to legitimize the new dynasty, historians still debate the true nature of Richard III's character and his culpability in the disappearance of the princes in the Tower. A mystery that continues to haunt English history. You feel the weight of this unsolved puzzle, the ambiguity that shrouds his reign, regardless of the truth. The public perception of him is tainted by the dark whispers of regicide and infanticide. Amidst this relentless power struggle, a relatively obscure figure begins to emerge from the shadows: Henry Tudor. He's a long-shot contender, a Welsh nobleman with a rather tenuous claim to the throne, stemming from his mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort, who had a Lancastrian lineage. albeit through a legitimized illegitimate line. You see him, an exile in Brittany, gathering support, carefully observing the chaos engulfing England. He's not a seasoned warrior like Richard III, nor does he possess the charisma of some of the earlier Plantagenets. Instead, he's a shrewd, calculating individual, patient and pragmatic, qualities that will prove invaluable in this brutal Game of Thrones. It's a testament to the sheer exhaustion of England that someone with such a weak claim could even be considered. The climactic moment arrives at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. You are there, feeling the tension, the dust, and the roar of thousands of men clashing in a final. Decisive showdown. Richard III, despite being a fierce fighter, is betrayed by some of his key supporters, most notably the Stanley family, who dramatically switch allegiances at a critical moment. You witness the brutal reality of medieval warfare chaos, close quarters combat, and the desperate struggle for survival. Richard III refusing to flee, fights valiantly, reputedly shouting treason before he is cut down. His crown is famously found in a hawthorn bush and placed on Henry Tudor's head, right there on the battlefield. You feel the abrupt, almost surreal shift in power, the immediate end of one dynasty and the violent birth of another. It's like watching a brutal, mud-soaked chess match, where the king is literally overthrown on the board. This sudden rise of Henry Tudor is quite the underdog story. His victory isn't just about military might, it's about seizing a fleeting opportunity in a moment of utter exhaustion. The English populace, weary of decades of war, is desperate for stability, for an end to the bloodshed. Henry, with his relatively clean slate and a promise of peace, offers that desperately needed hope. You sense the collective sigh of relief, even from those who might not have initially supported him, simply because he represents an end to the perpetual conflict. An intriguing, though perhaps unsettling, detail about Henry's rise is his extraordinary reliance on luck and opportune timing. He was born into a politically dangerous lineage, spent much of his youth in exile, and survived numerous plots and near captures. His ultimate victory at Bosworth wasn't a foregone conclusion, but rather a testament to a unique confluence of Richard III's unpopularity, the timely betrayals of some of Richard's allies, and Henry's own cautious ambition. He truly was the last man standing in a bloody free-for-all. The immediate aftermath of Bosworth is crucial. You watch as Henry, now Henry VII, quickly moves to consolidate his victory. He doesn't waste time savoring his triumph. His first act is to date his reign from the day before Bosworth Field, thereby making all those who fought against him at the battle traitors to the crown. This shrewd legal maneuver allows him to confiscate their lands and wealth, further bolstering his financial and political power. It's a cold, calculated move, demonstrating his pragmatic approach to kingship, to truly secure his throne and heal the bitter divisions of the Wars of the Roses. Henry VII makes a masterful political move. You see him marry Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of the late King Edward IV and niece of Richard III. This union symbolically merges the warring houses of Lancaster and York, uniting the red and white roses into the famous Tudor rose, a new emblem for a new era of peace and unity. You feel the immense significance of this marriage, not just as a personal bond, but as a powerful act of political reconciliation. It's a strategic alliance, a blending of bloodlines, designed to put an end to the endless cycle of vengeance and secure the loyalty of both Lancastrian and Yorkist factions. The disturbing truth behind the rise of the Tudor dynasty is that it was born from extreme violence, desperate gambles, and a shrewd understanding of a nation's weariness. Henry VII wasn't a charismatic hero. He was a survivor, a pragmatist, and a calculating politician who understood that stability, not glory, was what England desperately needed. His ascent marks the end of a chaotic chapter and the beginning of a new, equally complex and often brutal one, laying the foundation for one of England's most famous and infamous Royal houses. You sense that while the immediate bloodshed of the roses has ceased, the seeds of future disturbance have already been sown within the very foundations of this new, precarious dynasty. You now find yourself firmly within the nascent reign of Henry VII, the first Tudor king. And immediately you sense a shift from the overt bloodshed of the battlefields to a more subtle, yet equally disturbing, form of power consolidation. The immediate aftermath of Bosworth isn't a period of joyous celebration for Henry. It's a tense, precarious tightrope walk where every decision is critical for the survival of his new dynasty. You feel the palpable anxiety emanating from the court. The constant awareness that the throne he so recently won could be snatched away just as quickly. Henry's primary objective, you observe, is legitimacy. His claim to the throne, as you recall, is rather flimsy by traditional standards. He's not a direct male heir in the Yorkist line, nor is he from the main Lancastrian branch. He relies heavily on his victory in battle, which he shrewdly frames as divine favor. But he knows this isn't enough to secure long-term loyalty. You see him meticulously backtracking through history, trying to establish a more robust lineage, a grander narrative for his ascension. This involves carefully crafted propaganda, emphasizing his destiny and the supposed will of God in bringing him to power to end the bloody wars of the roses. It's like watching a modern-day politician trying to rewrite their backstory to appeal to the masses, only with far higher stakes. His marriage to Elizabeth of York is, as you witnessed earlier, a masterstroke. You observe the subtle dynamics of their union. While perhaps not a passionate love match, it is undeniably a politically astute one. Elizabeth herself is a strong contender for the throne in her own right. As the eldest daughter of Edward IV and a niece of Richard III, by marrying her, Henry not only unites the warring houses, symbolizing peace with the Tudor rose, but he also effectively neutralizes a potential rival. You feel the strategic brilliance of this move, binding together the two main factions and denying any future Yorkist claimant a clear figurehead around whom to rally. It's a calculated act of dynastic branding, creating a visual and symbolic representation of a unified England. However, despite the marriage, old loyalties die hard, and the Wars of the Roses have created a generation of individuals who know no other way of life than rebellion and intrigue. You sense the constant undercurrent of conspiracy swirling beneath the surface of the Tudor court. Henry VII faces a series of persistent threats and pretenders, individuals who claim to be the rightful heirs, often fabricating identities of long-lost Plantagenet princes. You witness the saga of Lambert Simnel, a young boy put forward in 1487 as Richard, Duke of York, one of the princes in the Tower. Simnel is crowned King Edward VI in Ireland and gains significant support from disgruntled Yorkists and foreign powers, including Margaret of York, Duchess of Burgundy, sister of Edward IV and Richard III. You see Henry VII's shrewd response. He parades the real Earl of Warwick, the true Edward Plantagenet, son of George, Duke of Clarence, who was also a potential Yorkist heir and whom Simnel was actually impersonating through the streets of London. Demonstrating that Simnel is a fraud, he then faces Simnel's forces at the Battle of Stoke Field. You feel the tension of this battle. Even though it's often overshadowed by Bosworth, it's a crucial test for the new dynasty. Henry crushes the rebellion, and in an act of surprising clemency or perhaps calculated propaganda, he doesn't execute Simnel. Instead, he gives him a job in the royal kitchens, effectively turning a potential rival into a royal servant. It's a genius move, showing both strength and a surprising touch of mercy, proving the young boy's true humble origins. Then comes the more serious threat of Perkin Warbeck. You follow Warbeck's story, a Flemish youth who emerges in 1491 claiming to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the princes in the Tower, asserting that he escaped his uncle Richard III's clutches. Unlike Simnel, Warbeck is more convincing, gaining recognition from several European monarchs, including the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian and King James IV of Scotland. You see Henry VII's patience being tested, as Warbeck becomes a persistent thorn in his side for nearly a decade, constantly seeking refuge and launching small, unsuccessful invasions of England. This long-running saga demonstrates the deep-seated yearning for a Yorkist restoration among some factions, and the fragility of Henry's grip on power. It's like a long, drawn-out game of whack-a-mole, where the mole just keeps popping up in different countries. Henry VII's response to these threats reveals his true character. He is a master of espionage and financial control. You observe his elaborate network of spies and informants, rooting out potential conspirators before they can gain significant traction. He understands that money is power, and he meticulously works to rebuild the royal treasury. Depleted by the Wars of the Roses, he introduces innovative, often unpopular, methods of taxation, like Morton's Fork, named after his Lord Chancellor. John Morton, a dilemma that ensured both the lavish and frugal paid heavily. If you lived ostentatiously, you clearly had money for taxes. If you lived frugally, you must have been saving. So you also had money for taxes. You feel the grumbling of the common people and the nobility alike under the weight of these financial pressures. This policy, while effective in replenishing the coffers, earns him a reputation for avarice, a particularly disturbing, yet effective aspect of Henry VII's reign is his ruthless suppression of dissent. He doesn't hesitate to use executions for those who pose a serious threat. Even if their claim to the throne is distant, you witness the sad fate of the real Earl of Warwick, the true Edward Plantagenet, kept imprisoned in the Tower of London since 1485. After Perkin Warbeck's failed rebellion in 1499, Henry VII, under pressure from Spain, who wouldn't allow their daughter, Catherine of Aragon, to marry his son Arthur until all viable threats to the Tudor throne were eliminated, executes Warwick. This is a cold, calculated murder of the last undisputed male Plantagenet heir, a young man who had spent most of his life in captivity and posed no real threat. You feel the chilling finality of this act, the elimination of a bloodline to secure a dynasty. It's a brutal secret, a quiet cruelty beneath the surface of his supposedly peaceful reign. Historians still debate the morality of Henry VII's execution of Warwick, weighing the pragmatic necessity of dynastic security against the fundamental injustice of killing a harmless prisoner. Henry also implements crucial administrative reforms to strengthen the monarchy. You see him establishing the Star Chamber, a court designed to deal with powerful nobles who might otherwise escape justice through bribery or intimidation. While it could be a force for good in bringing powerful individuals to account, it also had the potential to be abused, becoming a symbol of royal prerogative and later, arbitrary justice. He also encourages trade, sending out explorers and fostering commercial alliances. Understanding that a strong economy underpins a stable kingdom, he is a king obsessed with dynastic succession. You observe his careful planning of his children's marriages, particularly that of his eldest son, Arthur, Prince of Wales, to Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of the powerful Catholic monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. This alliance is not just about wealth, it's about international recognition and securing powerful allies against any lingering enemies. You see the elaborate preparations for this marriage, a grand affair designed to showcase the new Tudor dynasty's legitimacy and influence on the European stage. The quiet, almost stealthy nature of Henry VII's tyranny is one of the most disturbing aspects of his reign. He isn't a flamboyant tyrant like some future Tudors, he is a meticulous, calculating survivor who understands the subtle levers of power. He doesn't seek glory on the battlefield. He seeks stability in the treasury and legitimacy through careful diplomacy and, when necessary, cold-blooded elimination of rivals. You feel the pervasive atmosphere of suspicion, The sense that even the most loyal subjects must constantly prove their allegiance, lest they fall under the king's watchful, unforgiving eye. He truly built his dynasty brick by brick, but some of those bricks were cemented with blood and fear. By the time Henry VII dies in 1509, he has successfully achieved his goals. You observe a kingdom transformed. The royal treasury is full, the Civil War is over, and the Tudor dynasty is, for now, securely established. He has taken a crown snatched from a hawthorn bush and forged it into a formidable symbol of power. However, he also leaves behind a legacy of financial oppression and a deep-seated paranoia about succession, a hidden vulnerability that will soon explode into dramatic fashion with his formidable son. The brutal secrets of Henry VII's rise lie in his quiet ruthlessness and his unwavering focus on securing his family's precarious hold on the throne. No matter the cost, you now transition into a new chapter of Tudor history, one dominated by the imposing and often terrifying figure of Henry VIII. The second Tudor monarch, as Henry VII's son, he inherits a full treasury, a largely unified kingdom, and a secure succession. You feel the weight of expectations surrounding him, a sense of boundless potential as a young, charismatic king ascends to the throne. But beneath this veneer of promise lies a disturbing obsession, one that will reshape England forever. When Henry VIII takes the throne in 1509 at the age of 17, you witness a striking contrast to his cautious, calculating father. Henry VIII is everything his father was not: athletic, boisterous, intellectual, and deeply charming. You see him as a true Renaissance prince, excelling in jousting, hunting, music, and scholarship. He is fluent in Latin and French, a skilled musician who composes his own songs, and an avid theologian who even writes a book defending the Catholic Church against Martin Luther, earning him the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope. You feel the wave of optimism that greets his ascension. A new, golden age seems to be dawning for England. It's like watching a blockbuster movie trailer after a slow, thoughtful drama. However, beneath this dazzling exterior lies a profound anxiety, a deep-seated fear that will drive his most radical decisions, the desperate need for a male heir. You observe his devotion to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, his deceased elder brother, Arthur's widow. For the first 2 decades of their marriage, you see them as a seemingly devoted couple, sharing intellectual pursuits and a deep bond. But tragedy strikes repeatedly. Catherine endures several miscarriages and stillbirths, and though she gives birth to a healthy daughter, Mary. In 1516, no sons survive infancy. You feel Henry's increasing despair with each failed pregnancy, each lost son, in a world where a male heir guarantees dynastic stability. The lack of one is not just a personal disappointment, it's a national crisis, a terrifying echo of the recent Wars of the Roses. The Tudor Dynasty, though established, is still young and precarious. You remember how Henry VII worked so hard to secure the succession. Without a son, the line of succession would fall to his daughter Mary, a situation fraught with danger in a patriarchal society unaccustomed to female rule. You envision the potential for a renewed civil war, for ambitious nobles to dispute a female monarch's legitimacy, or for foreign powers to meddle in England's affairs. This is the disturbing obsession that consumes Henry VIII, the relentless pursuit of a male heir, even if it means tearing apart the very fabric of his kingdom, as Catherine ages and her chances of bearing a son diminish. Henry's gaze begins to wander. You observe his growing infatuation with Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting at court. Anne is witty, intelligent, and fiercely independent, a stark contrast to the more traditional Catherine. You feel the intense, forbidden passion that develops between them, a dangerous game played out in the secretive corridors of the palace. But Anne, shrewdly, refuses to become his mistress. She demands to be his queen. This demand ignites the infamous King's Great Matter. You witness Henry's desperate attempts to annul his marriage to Catherine. He argues that his marriage is invalid in the eyes of God. Citing Leviticus 20:21, which states that if a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. He claims that Catherine's previous marriage to Arthur, though brief and unconsummated, renders his own marriage sacrilegious and the cause of his lack of male heirs. You feel the theological and legal gymnastics involved, as Henry and his advisors twist scripture and legal precedent to suit his desires. It's like watching a particularly intricate and self-serving legal case being argued, where the jury is the entire kingdom and the judge is a very stubborn king. The Pope, Clement VII, however, is in a precarious position. You see the immense pressure he faces. Catherine of Aragon is the aunt of the powerful Holy Roman Emperor. Charles V, whose armies have recently sacked Rome and effectively hold the Pope captive. Annulment would be an insult to the emperor and an admission of papal errority in granting the initial dispensation for Henry to marry Catherine. You feel the diplomatic deadlock. The frustration of Henry as his appeals to Rome are met with procrastination and refusal. This resistance from Rome begins to shift Henry's perspective. You observe his growing frustration turning into a profound re-evaluation of papal authority. If the Pope will not grant him what he believes is his divine right, a legitimate male heir, then perhaps the Pope's authority over England is not absolute. This is where the truly disturbing aspect of his rise takes root. Henry's personal desire for a son becomes entwined with a radical assertion of royal power over the church. An intriguing, yet often overlooked detail about Henry VIII's personality during this period is his profound intellectual pride. He truly believed he was a brilliant theologian and legal scholar, and he bristled at being denied by the Pope. His initial defense of the Catholic Church had given him a taste for theological debate, and now he used that intellect, however flawed, to justify his own path, making his break with Rome not just pragmatic but deeply personal. The Great Matter thus transforms into the English Reformation. You witness the gradual, yet monumental, shift in England's religious landscape. Henry begins to assert his supremacy over the Church in England. He passes a series of acts through Parliament, systematically dismantling papal authority. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 is the crowning achievement of this process, formally declaring Henry VIII the supreme head of the Church of England. You feel the seismic shift, the profound break with centuries of tradition, as England carves its own religious path, no longer beholden to Rome. This is a brutal secret of the Tudor rise, the English Reformation, often portrayed as a grand theological movement, was in its initial stages largely driven by one man's desperate personal desire for a son. It was a revolution from the top down, imposed by royal will rather than popular demand. While there were certainly reformist sentiments already present in England, Henry's Great Matter provided the catalyst for their widespread implementation. It's like building a skyscraper because you needed a new shed for your lawnmower. The break with Rome has immediate and profound consequences. You see the dissolution of the monasteries, vast swaths of land and immense wealth seized by the crown. This act, while filling Henry's coffers and enriching his loyal supporters, also destroys centuries of religious and cultural heritage, throwing thousands of monks and nuns out onto the streets. You feel the tremor of discontent, the quiet resistance from those who remain loyal to the old faith. Figures like Sir Thomas More, his former Lord Chancellor, refuse to acknowledge the Act of Supremacy, choosing conscience over convenience, and are ultimately executed for treason. You witness their unwavering faith in the face of the king's absolute power. A chilling testament to the ruthlessness of the new order. Historians still debate the extent to which the dissolution of the monasteries was a financial necessity for Henry VIII. or simply an opportune way to reward loyal supporters and consolidate royal power. By 1533, with his annulment from Catherine, finally declared valid by the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, Henry marries a pregnant Anne Boleyn. You see the culmination of his desperate efforts. However, this triumph is short-lived, as the relentless pursuit of a male heir continues to cast its long, disturbing shadow. The stage is set for a tumultuous period of multiple marriages, political purges, and religious upheaval, all born from one king's burning desire for a son and the ruthless lengths he would go to achieve it. The very foundation of the Tudor Dynasty, built on peace, now rests on a bedrock of broken marriages, executed dissenters, and a church irrevocably altered. You now find yourself caught in the bewildering, often terrifying, whirlwind of Henry VIII's marital merry-go-round, a saga that wasn't just about love or lust, but about the relentless, brutal pursuit of a male heir and the security of the Tudor line. Each marriage, each annulment, and each execution reverberates through the court, leaving a trail of fear and uncertainty. You feel the palpable anxiety of those around the king, understanding that their fortunes, and even their lives, depend on the unpredictable whims of their monarch. Your initial focus is on Anne Boleyn, who, having finally married Henry in 1533, is now Queen of England. You observe her intelligence, her charm, but also her precarious position. She had promised Henry a son, and in September 1533 she gives birth not to a male heir, but to a daughter Elizabeth. You sense Henry's bitter disappointment, a cloud that immediately hangs over Anne's triumph. While Elizabeth is a healthy child, her gender is a cruel twist of fate for a king so desperate for a son. The pressure on Anne becomes immense, a suffocating weight that grows with each subsequent miscarriage and stillbirth. You see her desperation, her attempts to conceive a son, but fate seems to conspire against her. The court, ever opportunistic, begins to turn against Anne. You hear the whispers, the accusations of witchcraft and promiscuity, fueled by her enemies who see an opportunity to regain influence by bringing her down. Henry, increasingly impatient and disillusioned, begins to believe the rumors, or perhaps simply uses them as a convenient excuse. His eye has already fallen on another lady-in-waiting, the quiet and unassuming Jane Seymour. The downfall of Anne Boleyn is swift and brutal, a shocking demonstration of Henry's absolute power. In May 1536, she is arrested on trumped-up charges of adultery, incest, and treason. You feel the profound injustice of the accusations, the utter lack of due process in a court utterly subservient to the king's will. Her supposed lovers, including her own brother, are executed first, then, in a chilling spectacle, Anne Boleyn herself is taken to the scaffold on Tower Hill. You witness the solemn procession, the final dignity of a woman facing an unjust death. She maintains her innocence to the end, praying for the king and for England, her execution by sword, a more merciful death than the axe, is carried out by a French swordsman. This brutal act is a stark warning to anyone who might displease the king. It's like watching a particularly cruel game of chess where the king simply removes a piece when he no longer finds it useful, regardless of the rules. The disturbing secret behind Anne's demise is not just Henry's desire for a son, but his cold willingness to completely rewrite reality to achieve his aims. He annulled his marriage to Catherine of Aragon by claiming it was invalid from the start. Now he executes Anne Boleyn by declaring her marriage invalid and her child illegitimate, all to clear the path for his next attempt at securing a male heir. This legal contortionism, supported by a compliant parliament and fearful clergy, reveals the terrifying extent of his power. Just days after Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry marries Jane Seymour. You observe the quiet hope that surrounds this union. Jane is everything Anne was not: demure, pious, and seemingly content to be in the king's shadow. She offers stability and, most importantly, the promise of a legitimate male heir. You see Henry's profound relief when, in October 1537, Jane gives birth to Edward VI. A healthy son, the kingdom rejoices, finally. The Tudor succession seems secure. Bells ring, bonfires are lit, and celebrations erupt across England. This is the moment Henry had so desperately sought, the culmination of years of turmoil and brutal decisions. However, tragedy strikes again, just 2 weeks after Edward's birth. Jane Seymour dies from complications related to childbirth. You feel the profound grief that engulfs Henry. Jane was perhaps the only wife he truly loved, the one who gave him his longed-for son. Her death leaves him heartbroken and briefly inconsolable. It's a poignant reminder that even a king who wields absolute power is still vulnerable to the capriciousness of fate, despite having a male heir. Henry's desire for further sons and his own restless nature drives him to seek a fourth wife. You witness his efforts to forge political alliances through marriage. He marries Anne of Cleves in 1540, a German princess chosen for political reasons. However, Henry finds her physically unattractive, and the marriage is never consummated. You observe his immediate regret, his thinly veiled disgust. The marriage is quickly annulled, a surprisingly quick and bloodless end to a royal union. Largely due to Anne's pragmatic agreement to the annulment and a generous settlement, she wisely accepts her fate and lives out her days comfortably in England. It's almost a moment of light comedic relief in an otherwise dark series of marital dramas. As Henry calls her the Flanders mare, his fifth marriage is to Catherine Howard, a young, vivacious cousin of Anne Boleyn. You see Henry, now older, heavier, and increasingly unwell, attempting to recapture his youth through this passionate, but ill-fated, union. Catherine, however, is young and imprudent. She engages in affairs, both before and during her marriage to the king, a dangerous game of infidelity that is quickly discovered by Henry's watchful counselors. You feel the rising tide of scandal, the betrayal that Henry himself, a serial philanderer, cannot tolerate from his queen. In 1542, she is accused of treason and executed. Her story is a tragic echo of Anne Boleyn's. A young life extinguished by the unforgiving machinery of the Tudor court. Finally, Henry marries his sixth and last wife, Catherine Parr, in 1543. You observe her as a wise, mature woman who serves as a devoted companion and nursemaid to the ailing king in his final years. She is also a stepmother to his 3 children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, and plays a crucial role in reuniting the royal household and ensuring they receive a proper education. She survives Henry, navigating the treacherous waters of court with remarkable skill and intelligence. She is perhaps the best example of how to survive a relationship with Henry VIII. Be kind, be intelligent, and, most importantly, be lucky enough to marry him when he's already too sick to execute you. The brutal secret woven into the fabric of Henry VIII's marriages is the profound vulnerability of women in positions of power within the Tudor court, even as queens. Their worth was primarily tied to their ability to produce a male heir and their adherence to the king's ever-changing will. Their lives were constantly at risk, subject to the whims of a powerful, often paranoid, monarch. It's a stark reminder of the patriarchal nature of the era, where royal women were pawns in a dynastic game. Their ultimate fate often decided by the fertility of their wombs and the perceived purity of their conduct. Historians still debate whether Henry VIII was a true monster, a product of his time, or a deeply insecure man whose fear of dynastic instability drove him to extreme measures. The truth probably contains elements of all three, as Henry VIII nears the end of his tumultuous reign. He has secured his male heir, Edward. He has transformed England's religious landscape and asserted the supreme authority of the crown. But he leaves behind a legacy of religious instability, a volatile succession that includes 3 children from 3 different mothers, and a kingdom where the chilling lessons of royal power and its ruthless application have been deeply ingrained. The disturbing rise of the Tudor Dynasty, marked by its violent beginning, is now indelibly stained by the king's personal obsessions and the tragic fates of his queens. You now witness the immediate aftermath of Henry VIII's death in 1547 and the sudden, tumultuous reality of England's religious upheaval. With the Titan king gone, the delicate balance he had precariously maintained between Catholic tradition and Protestant reform begins to unravel. You feel the tremor of uncertainty throughout the kingdom, a sense that the religious landscape, so recently reshaped, is now up for grabs. The throne is inherited by Henry's only surviving son, Edward VI, who is a mere 9 years old. You observe this boy king, frail and often ill, ascending to a position of immense power. He is an intelligent and devout Protestant, having been educated by staunch reformists. However, his youth means that real power rests in the hands of a regency council, dominated by his maternal uncle, Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, and later by John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. You feel the profound weakness of a child on the throne. The shifting alliances and power struggles of ambitious men vying for control behind the scenes. It's like watching a high-stakes puppet show, where the real strings are pulled by unseen hands under Edward VI's reign. The Protestant Reformation accelerates with a fervent zeal that Henry VIII for all his radical changes, never fully embraced. You see the rapid dismantling of remaining Catholic practices. Latin Mass is replaced by services in English. The images and stained glass windows in churches are destroyed, and traditional Catholic rituals are systematically abolished. The Book of Common Prayer, introduced by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, becomes the mandatory liturgy for all English churches, a symbol of the new Protestant uniformity. You witness the fervor of the reformers, their genuine belief that they are purifying the church and leading England towards true piety. This is a deliberate, top-down cultural and religious revolution, attempting to stamp out centuries of deeply ingrained Catholic traditions. You feel the mixed reactions to these sweeping changes. For devout Protestants, these reforms are a joyous liberation, finally allowing them to worship God in their own language and in a way they believe to be more biblical. But for many ordinary English people, especially in more conservative areas, these changes are deeply disturbing. You hear the grumbling, the quiet resistance, and sometimes outright rebellion. The destruction of cherished saints' images, the removal of familiar rituals, and the forced adoption of a new liturgy create widespread resentment. The Prayer Book Rebellion of 1549 in the West Country is a stark example, where thousands of commoners rise up against the new religious reforms. You witness the brutal suppression of this rebellion, a testament to the fact that even religious changes born from conviction could only be enforced through violence. It's almost like someone changing the rules of a beloved game overnight and expecting everyone to happily go along with it. A particularly disturbing aspect of Edward VI's reign, though he himself was just a child, is the escalating persecution of religious dissenters, while Henry VIII executed those who defied his supremacy. Edward's regime targets those who reject Protestant doctrine. You see individuals, both Catholic and radical Anabaptist, imprisoned, tortured, and sometimes executed for their beliefs. The very concept of religious tolerance is alien in this period. Uniformity of belief is seen as essential for national stability. This highlights a brutal secret of the Reformation. It wasn't just about freedom of conscience. It was often about enforcing new dogmas with the same zeal as the old ones. The regents, particularly the Duke of Northumberland, also consolidate their own power and enrich themselves through land seizures from the church. You observe the vast wealth that pours into the coffers of these powerful nobles, further deepening the divide between the elite and the common people. This naked avarice, disguised under the cloak of religious reform, breeds further discontent and cynicism among the populace. An interesting, though often overshadowed, detail of Edward VI's short reign is his genuinely keen interest in learning and his clear intellectual aptitude. Despite his young age, he kept detailed journals, corresponded with scholars, and possessed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of theology and politics. Had he lived, historians still debate whether Edward VI would have become a strong, independent Protestant monarch, or if he would have continued to be largely influenced by his powerful counselors. His early death leaves that question forever unanswered, adding a layer of poignant what if to his story. As Edward VI's health begins to fail in 1553, the fragility of the Tudor succession once again becomes terrifyingly apparent. He has no children, and according to Henry VIII's will, the crown should pass to his half-sister Mary, Henry's daughter by Catherine of Aragon. However, Mary is a staunch Catholic, deeply devoted to the faith her mother had upheld and which Henry VIII had outlawed. Her ascension would mean a complete reversal of the Protestant reforms. You witness the desperate maneuverings of the Duke of Northumberland to prevent Mary's succession. He convinces the dying Edward VI to draw up a new will, bypassing both Mary and Elizabeth, who was also Protestant, but had been declared illegitimate by Henry VIII's annulment of Anne Boleyn, and naming his Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as his heir. Lady Jane is a grandniece of Henry VIII through his younger sister Mary. You feel the audacity of this plot, a blatant attempt to usurp the legitimate succession and maintain Protestant control. It's a last desperate gamble by the reformers to prevent England from reverting to Catholicism. Edward VI dies in July 1553, and Lady Jane Grey is proclaimed Queen of England. You see her, a young, intelligent, and reluctant pawn in this dangerous game. Forced into a role she neither sought nor desired, her reign is famously brief, lasting only 9 days. The people of England, despite the religious divisions, largely favor the legitimate succession as laid out by Henry VIII's will and rally behind Princess Mary. You feel the surge of popular support for Mary, a reflection of both dynastic loyalty and, for many, a yearning for the old Catholic ways. It's like watching a game of musical chairs where the music stops and everyone rushes to the wrong seat. Mary quickly gathers support, and Northumberland's coup collapses with surprising speed. You witness his humiliating surrender and subsequent execution. Lady Jane Grey, along with her husband and key supporters, is imprisoned in the Tower of London, while Mary initially shows clemency towards Jane. The continued political instability and another rebellion. Wyatt's rebellion in 1554, seeking to depose Mary and put Elizabeth on the throne, force Mary's hand. You see the tragic, inevitable end for Lady Jane Grey, a young woman of only 16 or 17 executed for a crown she never truly wanted. Her death is another brutal secret of the Tudor dynasty, a life sacrificed to the ruthless politics of succession. The end of Edward VI's reign and the failed Lady Jane Grey coup underscore the profound instability that religious divisions brought to England. Henry VIII's attempt to impose a new religious order, primarily for his own dynastic reasons, opened a Pandora's box of theological, political, and social conflict. The disturbing truth of this period is that religious conviction, when wielded by those in power, became a terrifying weapon, capable of overturning centuries of tradition and costing lives on a scale unseen before. England, still reeling from the Wars of the Roses, now faces a new kind of internal conflict, one rooted in the very souls of its people. And the stage is set for a queen who will attempt to violently turn back the clock. You are now immersed in the chilling and often terrifying reign of Mary I, the first undisputed queen regnant of England, after the turbulent, Protestant-leaning years of her half-brother Edward VI. You feel the abrupt and dramatic shift in the religious landscape. Mary's ascension in 1553 brings with it a single, burning obsession: the complete restoration of Catholicism in England. This isn't merely a political goal for her, it is a profound, deeply personal mission, born from years of humiliation, persecution, and unwavering faith. You observe Mary herself, a woman marked by a difficult past, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She was declared illegitimate by her father. Henry VIII endured years of separation from her mother. Anne suffered religious persecution under Edward VI. You see the deep scars of these experiences, which forged in her a fierce loyalty to the Catholic Church and a conviction that her mother's faith was the only true path. Her reign is her opportunity to right the wrongs of the past, to bring England back into the spiritual fold of Rome. She is deeply pious, often spending hours in prayer, and genuinely believes that she is acting as God's instrument to save England's soul. Immediately upon her accession, you witness Mary's swift actions to reverse the Protestant reforms. She repeals Edward VI's religious legislation, restores the Latin Mass, brings back Catholic ceremonies, and begins the process of reinstating the monasteries that her father had dissolved. You feel the collective sigh of relief from England's remaining Catholics, who had suffered under the previous regimes. But you also feel the palpable alarm among Protestants, who suddenly find their lives and beliefs under threat. It's like watching a pendulum swing violently from one extreme to the other, dragging an entire nation along with it. Mary's greatest desire, however, is not just to restore Catholicism, but to ensure a Catholic succession. You observe her decision to marry Philip II of Spain, son of the powerful Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. This marriage is deeply unpopular in England. You hear the widespread fear that England will become a mere satellite of the powerful Spanish Empire, a pawn in European power politics. The English people resent the idea of a foreign king, particularly a Spaniard, wielding influence over their country. You feel the xenophobia and distrust that permeate the public mood. This fear culminates in Wyatt's rebellion in 1554, which, as you recall, aims to prevent the Spanish marriage and place Princess Elizabeth on the throne. You witness its brutal suppression, highlighting Mary's ruthless determination to assert her will. Despite the widespread opposition, the marriage proceeds. You see Philip II, like a serious, pious, and somewhat aloof figure, arrive in England. Their union is more of a political alliance than a love match. Although Mary genuinely adores Philip, however, the crucial element, a child, never materializes. Mary experiences 2 phantom pregnancies, a tragic reflection of her desperate longing for an heir, and her deep-seated belief that a child is God's sign of approval for her mission. You feel her profound disappointment and increasing isolation as her health deteriorates, and her hopes for a Catholic heir fade. The most disturbing and enduring legacy of Mary's reign is her relentless persecution of Protestants, earning her the infamous moniker Bloody Mary. You witness the chilling spectacle of the Marian persecutions, where hundreds of men and women are burned at the stake for heresy. Prominent Protestant leaders, including Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, who had presided over her mother's annulment and her father's Protestant reforms, along with Bishops Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley, are among the first victims. You feel the horror of these public executions, designed to strike terror into the hearts of dissenters and force religious conformity. The smell of burning flesh, the screams of the condemned, the solemn pronouncements of the zealous authorities. It's a terrifying sensory experience that haunts the memory of her reign. You observe the careful legal process behind these burnings. Mary's government revives old heresy laws, and individuals are brought before ecclesiastical courts. They are given the opportunity to recant their Protestant beliefs. If they refuse, they are condemned to death, while seemingly legal. The process is driven by an unwavering theological conviction that Protestants are heretics deserving of death for the good of their souls and the spiritual health of the nation. This is a brutal secret of her reign. The horrific acts were carried out not out of arbitrary cruelty, but out of a deeply held, yet terrifyingly misguided religious conviction. It's almost like watching someone meticulously follow a horrifying recipe, believing they are doing God's work. The victims come from all walks of life: humble artisans, farmers, as well as prominent clergy. You see the sheer number of executions, estimated at nearly 300 over 4 years, creating a profound sense of terror and resentment among the populace, instead of crushing Protestantism. The burnings often have the opposite effect, creating martyrs and hardening the resolve of those who oppose her. The sight of ordinary people enduring such horrific deaths for their faith solidifies Protestant sentiment and creates a deep aversion to Catholicism for generations to come. An intriguing, yet often overlooked detail is the impact of John Foxe's Book of Martyrs, published after Mary's reign. This highly influential work vividly documented the stories of the Protestant martyrs, complete with gruesome illustrations, solidifying Mary's Bloody Mary epithet and cementing a deeply negative perception of Catholicism in the English consciousness for centuries. It's a powerful example of how historical narrative can be shaped by selective memory and vivid portrayal. Mary's foreign policy, deeply entwined with her Spanish marriage, also proves disastrous. You witness England being dragged into a war with France, primarily to support Spain. This alliance leads to the loss of Calais in 1558, England's last continental possession, a humiliating blow to national pride that causes Mary immense grief. You feel the bitterness of this loss, a symbol of England's diminished standing on the European stage under her rule, as Mary's health rapidly declines. The question of succession again becomes paramount. She has no children, and it becomes clear that her half-sister, Elizabeth, a Protestant, is the inevitable heir. You observe the profound irony and ultimate failure of Mary's reign despite all her efforts, all the bloodshed. England is destined to return to Protestant rule. Mary, knowing this, is said to have died heartbroken. Lamenting the loss of Calais and the continued Protestant heresy in her kingdom, Mary's reign is a dark chapter in Tudor history, a period of fierce religious reaction and brutal persecution. Her relentless determination to restore Catholicism, coupled with her personal tragedies and her ill-fated Spanish marriage, cemented her place in history as Bloody Mary. The brutal secret of her reign is that her deep religious conviction, rather than leading to salvation, led to widespread suffering and inadvertently strengthened the very Protestantism she sought to eradicate. Her story serves as a chilling testament to the dangers of imposing religious conformity through force, paving the way for a very different kind of queen who would attempt to find a more pragmatic, if still precarious, path to national unity. You now step into the complex and often dazzling reign of Elizabeth I, a period that will become known as England's Golden Age, yet one fraught with constant danger, political intrigue, and personal sacrifice. Following the turmoil of Mary I's reign, you feel the collective sigh of relief as a Protestant monarch once again takes the throne in 1558. However, you also sense the deep anxieties that immediately surround her. She is a woman in a man's world, a queen without a husband or heir, and a Protestant ruler in a kingdom still scarred by religious division. You observe Elizabeth herself, a figure of immense intelligence, charisma, and political acumen, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. She has survived a childhood marked by illegitimacy, the execution of her mother, imprisonment in the Tower, and constant threats to her life. You see the lessons she learned from these brutal experiences: caution, pragmatism, and a keen understanding of power. She is fluent in multiple languages, deeply learned, and possesses a sharp wit. She is also a master of self-presentation, cultivating an image of a glorious, almost mythical queen, often adorned in elaborate gowns and jewels, a calculated display of power designed to inspire awe and loyalty. It's like watching a master strategist play a very long, high-stakes game of chess, where every move is carefully considered. Elizabeth's immediate challenge is the religious settlement. You remember the turbulent pendulum swings of her father and siblings. She understands that imposing one extreme or the other will only lead to further civil unrest. You witness her pragmatic approach, seeking a middle ground between Catholicism and extreme Protestantism. The Elizabethan religious settlement of 1559 establishes the Church of England as Protestant, but retains many elements of traditional Catholic worship, including ornate vestments and some traditional ceremonies. She becomes Supreme Governor of the Church, a softer title than Supreme Head, but still asserting royal authority. You feel the careful balancing act, the subtle compromises designed to appeal to the broadest possible spectrum of her subjects, hoping to prevent further religious bloodshed. This becomes a cornerstone of her reign, a remarkably successful attempt at religious peace, but one that is constantly under threat. However, despite her efforts, religious divisions remain a brutal secret of her reign and a constant source of threat. You observe the Puritans, radical Protestants who believe Elizabeth's church is not reformed enough, constantly pushing for more austere Calvinist practices. At the other extreme, you feel the persistent danger from Catholic recusants, those who remain loyal to the Pope and often view Elizabeth as illegitimate. Plots against her life, often supported by Catholic powers in Europe, are a continuous menace. You see the elaborate spy network, led by figures like Sir Francis Walsingham, constantly working to uncover and thwart these conspiracies. The fear of assassination is palpable, a constant shadow over her seemingly glorious reign. It's like living in a beautiful house, but always knowing there are assassins lurking in the shadows outside. The most enduring and disturbing challenge to Elizabeth's reign is her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. You follow Mary's tumultuous story, a Catholic queen, once Queen of France, now exiled in England after being deposed from her Scottish throne. She is Elizabeth's closest living relative with a strong claim to the English throne, and for many English and European Catholics, she is the legitimate heir. You feel the immense threat she poses to Elizabeth, a rallying point for all those who wish to overthrow the Protestant queen. Mary's presence in England, initially under a degree of comfortable house arrest, becomes an agonizing dilemma for Elizabeth. For nearly 2 decades, you witness Elizabeth's reluctance to act decisively against Mary. She fears setting a dangerous precedent by executing an anointed queen, and she knows that Mary's execution would provoke Catholic Europe, especially Spain. However, Mary is at the heart of numerous Catholic plots against Elizabeth's life. The most famous of these is the Babington Plot of 1586, in which conspirators plan to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the throne. Walsingham's spies intercept coded letters between Mary and the plotters, providing irrefutable proof of her complicity. You are present for the chilling moment when Elizabeth, after agonizing over the decision, finally signs Mary's death warrant. You feel the profound weight of this choice. It is a necessary, yet deeply painful, act for Elizabeth, an elimination of a rival that haunts her conscience. Mary, Queen of Scots, is executed in February 1587. Her execution is a brutal secret, a regicide designed to secure a throne, mirroring the dark acts that brought the Tudors to power in the first place. This act solidifies Elizabeth's grip on power, but also removes any ambiguity about her willingness to act ruthlessly when her throne is threatened. An intriguing, yet often overlooked detail about Elizabeth Guillaume is her profound mastery of propaganda and public image. She meticulously cultivated her image as the Virgin Queen, married only to her kingdom and her people. This allowed her to avoid the pressures of a dynastic marriage, which could have embroiled England in foreign alliances or created conflicts over succession. It also transformed her into a revered, almost divine, symbol of national unity and strength. It's almost like she invented the concept of a royal brand, long before marketing existed. The constant threat of invasion, particularly from Catholic Spain, looms large throughout Elizabeth's reign. You observe the simmering tensions, the religious animosity, and the competition for global power that leads to direct conflict. In 1588, the formidable Spanish Armada set sail, an immense fleet intended to invade England and restore Catholicism. You feel the sheer terror and defiance that sweeps through England. Elizabeth's famous speech at Tilbury, where she declares, "I know I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too," electrifies her troops in the nation. You witness the dramatic sea battles, the role of English naval skill, and, crucially, the devastating impact of storms that cripple the Armada, forcing its retreat. This victory is a monumental triumph for Elizabeth, cementing her image as a divinely favored monarch and ensuring England's Protestant future. It's a nail-biting cinematic clash that secures her place in history. Elizabeth's reign is also a period of remarkable cultural flourishing. You see the rise of literary giants like William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, the blossoming of poetry, drama, and exploration. England begins to establish itself as a major naval power, with daring explorers like Sir Francis Drake circumnavigating the globe and challenging Spanish dominance. You feel the sense of national pride, the adventurous spirit that characterizes this era. This is truly the Golden Age, a time of unprecedented artistic and exploratory achievement. However, the late years of Elizabeth's reign are marked by increasing financial strain, a long war with Spain, and the question of succession. You observe her aging, becoming more isolated, and refusing to name a clear successor. She remembers the instability caused by her father's multiple wives and constant succession anxieties. This deliberate ambiguity, while perhaps preserving her power during her lifetime, creates a new layer of uncertainty as her reign draws to a close. Historians still debate whether Elizabeth's refusal to name an heir was a brilliant political strategy to maintain control, or a dangerous procrastination that risked plunging England back into turmoil after her death. As Elizabeth I approaches her death in 1603, you feel the end of an era. The Tudor Dynasty, born from the chaos of the Wars of the Roses and secured by ruthlessness and political genius, is about to conclude. Elizabeth, the last of the Tudor monarchs, dies childless. But she leaves behind a nation transformed Protestant, a growing naval power, and culturally vibrant. The disturbing rise of the Tudor dynasty, characterized by its brutal beginnings and the ruthless decisions of its rulers, culminates in a period of unprecedented stability and glory. Yet, that glory was always underpinned by a constant battle against conspiracies, religious divisions, and the ever-present threat of violence. A legacy that forever casts a long, intriguing shadow over England. You now observe the immediate aftermath of Elizabeth I's death in 1603, marking not just the end of her remarkable reign, but the definitive sunset of the Tudor dynasty. As the last of Henry VII's direct line, her passing without a direct heir creates a momentary gasp of uncertainty throughout England. However, unlike the chaotic transitions of the past, this one is remarkably smooth, a testament to Elizabeth's careful political maneuvering in her final years. You feel the collective sigh of relief as James VI of Scotland, son of Mary, Queen of Scots, quietly ascends to the English throne as James I, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland. This peaceful transition is, in itself, a stark contrast to the bloody birth of the Tudor line. However, the legacy of the Tudors, particularly the lingering religious divisions, casts a long shadow over this new Stuart era. You remember the extreme swings from Henry VIII's ambiguous break with Rome, to Edward VI's fervent Protestantism, to Mary I's brutal Catholic restoration, and finally to Elizabeth's more moderate but still Protestant settlement. These shifts left deep fissures within English society, creating a landscape where religious conformity was constantly enforced, and dissent, whether Catholic or Puritan, was often met with suspicion and persecution. You feel the underlying tension, the unresolved conflicts that would plague England for decades to come, eventually erupting into its own bloody civil war in the mid-17th century, the Tudors, despite their often brutal methods, transformed England into a more centralized and powerful state. You observe how Henry VII meticulously built up the royal treasury and asserted royal authority over the nobility, diminishing their feudal power. Henry VIII's break with Rome, while driven by personal desire, inadvertently placed immense power in the hands of the monarch, making the crown the supreme authority in both temporal and spiritual matters. Elizabeth I, through her political genius and masterful control of Parliament, further solidified royal prerogative and a burgeoning sense of national identity. You feel the foundations of a modern state being laid, with a stronger monarchy, a more centralized bureaucracy, and a growing sense of national purpose. This is a crucial, if often disturbing, part of their legacy. They forged a nation-state out of a war-torn feudal realm. A particularly disturbing aspect of the Tudor legacy is the indelible mark left by their ruthless use of the executioner's axe. You recall the numerous figures who met their end on the scaffold at Tower Hill, two of Henry VIII's wives. Prominent statesmen like Sir Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell, powerful nobles, and countless religious dissenters. These executions weren't just about punishment, they were powerful displays of royal authority, designed to instill fear and obedience. You see the chilling symbolism of the Tower of London, a place of imprisonment and death, a constant reminder of the consequences of displeasing the crown. The phrase losing one's head became a very literal and common fear for anyone in the Tudor court. It's like watching a real-life horror show where the cast list keeps shrinking, and everyone knows their turn could be next. The Tudor dynasty also profoundly shaped England's international standing. You remember Henry VII's shrewd diplomatic marriages, connecting England to powerful European families. Henry VIII, initially a significant player in continental power struggles, later pivoted to assert England's independence. But it was Elizabeth I who truly established England as a formidable naval and colonial power. You feel the pride and ambition that fueled the age of exploration, as English ships challenged Spanish dominance and laid the groundwork for a vast empire. The defeat of the Spanish Armada is a singular moment of national triumph, a testament to the strength forged under Tudor rule, and intriguing yet often overlooked. Detail of the Tudor legacy is their profound impact on the English language and literature. The Reformation, by promoting the Bible in English, helped standardize the language. The flourishing of the arts during Elizabeth's reign, particularly the explosion of drama and poetry with figures like Shakespeare, left an unparalleled literary heritage. You can almost hear the rich, vibrant language evolving, a direct consequence of the cultural shifts initiated during this turbulent period. The Tudor period also leaves behind a complex relationship between the monarch and Parliament. While the Tudors asserted a strong royal prerogative, they also, paradoxically, strengthened Parliament as an institution. Henry VIII used Parliament extensively to pass his Reformation legislation, thereby giving it an unprecedented role in matters of church and state. Elizabeth I was a master at managing Parliament, knowing when to concede and when to stand firm. This dynamic, however, laid the groundwork for future conflicts between Crown and Parliament that would explode into civil war under the Stuarts. Historians still debate whether the Tudors, despite their authoritarian tendencies, inadvertently sowed the seeds of parliamentary democracy by frequently consulting and empowering the institution. The cult of personality surrounding the Tudor monarchs, particularly Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, continues to fascinate. You see how they meticulously crafted their public images, using art, literature, and ceremony to project an aura of power, divinity, and national glory. These were not just rulers, they were larger-than-life figures who understood the power of spectacle and propaganda. This deliberate shaping of public perception, often obscuring the brutal realities of their rule, is a critical part of their enduring mystique. It's like they were the original spin doctors, constantly perfecting their own narrative. As the Tudor dynasty gives way to the Stuarts, you reflect on the ultimate unsettling truth of their rise and reign. They were a product of their brutal times, and they often met brutality with even greater brutality. They navigated a chaotic landscape, eliminated rivals, imposed religious conformity, and asserted absolute power, all in the name of securing their precarious hold on the throne and, they would argue, ensuring England's stability. Their reign, though often described as glorious, was built on a foundation of fear, execution, and ruthless political maneuvering. The very concept of a disturbing rise perfectly encapsulates the Tudor story. They didn't gently inherit power, they seized it through violence and maintained it through a mixture of shrewdness, force, and a healthy dose of good fortune. Their legacy is one of transformative change, but it's a change that came at a very high human cost. The echoes of their decisions, their triumphs, and their cruelties still resonate through the hallowed halls of English history. A reminder of a dynasty that forever changed the face of a nation. The sun has set on the Tudors, but their long, fascinating shadow continues to stretch across the centuries. The historical tapestry of the Tudors now begins to fade. The vibrant, often unsettling, colors of their reign softening into the quiet hues of history. You feel the rapid heartbeat of a distant era slowing, the clatter of swords and the whispers of intrigue dissolving into the gentle hum of the fan. Let the faces of the powerful, the desperate, and the doomed melt away from your mind's eye. The brutal secrets have been laid bare, the dramatic rise and fall of a dynasty understood. Drift now. Let the complexities of their reign become a distant memory. A fascinating story told to lull you into the peaceful depths of slumber. All the tension, all the drama, released into the quiet night.